You should have already read and analyzed your fairy tales, meaning that you know some of the core elements that have to be there and some of the things that are different. And then you're going to be coming up with ideas of what you want to analyze and talk about in your essay. Now, the thing that's going to be the hardest about this is that you don't want to just stop and say, here's what's the same and here's what's different. But instead, you want to say, how do those differences affect the story? And that's really what I want to talk through here today. So, my daughter has a story that's called like Fairy Tale Mix Up, and it goes through all of the or several of the different princesses from Snow White and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and Rapunzel, and they all have a problem with their current fairy tale, and so they go to the other one's fairy tale and try that to see if it's any better. And then there's a problem when they go back and end up either changing or tweaking and making their own fairy tale better. So I'm going to focus on Cinderella for this one. And if I talk about it with, the classic Cinderella story, how that's different. So in Fairy Tale Mix Up, just like the classic, both of them have this princess. They both go to a ball. They both have mean stepsisters. And they both end up with a guy. Okay. Now, some of the differences is that in the Fairy Tale Mix Up, Cinderella is too tired for the ball and doesn't want to go, versus she does want to go to the ball. And then also a difference is at the end of the Fairy Tale Mix Up, she decides to go to college instead, finds a new guy who's less well off but well read. So, and then there's a cute little picture of her like leaning up against a guy who totally looks like he goes to college with little glasses and stuff, and they're both reading their own books. So she ends up with a guy, but she does not end up with the prince, versus she marries the prince. So, she also no, I think those are the main differences anyway that I'm at least going to focus on. So if I've already written an introduction, then I need to think about my thesis statement. I am probably going to make another video talking about the introduction, and this one is going to be more focused on how does that look to really analyze these differences and similarities within a paragraph. First thing is that I need to start off with a topic sentence that tells my reader really what the core of this paragraph is going to be about. So I can say Disney's Cinderella in movies and books get italicized. And this is a short story, so I'm going to use quotation marks for this. And it's have a hyphen. Actually, the hyphen is supposed to be here. Mix up. Fairy Tale Mix Up. Both use the princess storyline, but end differently. It's a very general, but it gives me something to work with as I get going. So since I am going to talk about these similarities and differences, I'll decide which one I want to talk about first. And I think I'm just going to start with the Disney's Cinderella. And in this paragraph, I'm going to be specifically focusing on how the ending shapes things, because that's the most interesting piece to me. So I will say in the Disney version, Cinderella meets her prince, and he discovers, I should have a comma here, that she is the one he danced with at the ball. They immediately get married and live happily ever after. However, in the twisted version, Cinderella decides she is unhappy with the prince and tired of the lifestyle. So she um, quit, or she decides to enroll in college and meets an average guy instead. Now, I have only just said the differences. I have not yet said how does this affect the storyline, and that's the really important piece that I think a lot of students are going to forget. So if I'm thinking through this, I would say this difference challenges the traditional story, which implies Cinderella needed the man in her life to be happy and rescue her from being treated poorly by her family. However, I already said however as a transition, maybe we can set it up. On the other hand, okay, let's see. This difference challenges this traditional story, which implies, and I'll put a comment there to show that the which implies goes with the story, needed the man in her life to be happy and rescue her from being treated poorly by her family. So now I'll say by having Cinderella make her own bold decision to pursue education, she is given some agency. Agency means, and this is a new word for myself this year, that a character makes things happen for themselves. They are in charge of their decisions and their choices instead of things just happening to them. They make things happen. She's given some agency. While she still ends up with a man at the end, he is not rescuing her because she has already made her own choice to change her life. He is also more average and intellectual, which places the value on brains instead of class status, because he's from the upper class and royalty in the Disney version. And I can, instead of ending on this, since it's kind of a new note, and you always know you're bringing up a new idea if you use the word also, then I'm going to try to wrap this up overall and say something like, while they both have Cinderella, let's see, what did I say was one of the similarities I could say? Happy with a man. One is because he chose her, and the other is because she chose. I kind of want to say she chose him, but I also kind of want to put an emphasis on the college and the education. So maybe I'll say because she chose to better herself, which led to him. I think that brings a happy medium to both. So again, don't just say the differences. Instead, say how those differences affect the story. And that would be a solid body paragraph.